When a student comes to us to learn English, we ask them, hey, why do you want to learn this language? And most of them say that I want to be fluent in this language. And that's the problem. We have a vague goal when it comes to picking up a language called fluency. And the problem with that is that that goal is way too ambitious and does not solve for our actual need. We mainly focus on training people on public speaking, but every once in a while people come to us and ask us about English, training them in English. And we've noticed that a lot of these people have already done some sort of coaching classes in English, or they've taken the IELTS or the TOEFLs, but for some reason they are still not able to hold conversations in this language. And it really got us thinking that why does that tend to happen? Why do people who actually go through formal methods of education in this language end up in almost the same place that they started at? And at the same time, there are speakers who are not the best at English, but they're still giving speeches and presentations to thousands of people regularly, and they're doing it quite well. So how does that happen? It all comes down to psychology. A lot of these methods of teaching English seem to be very technically focused. They treat English like it's maths. In maths, if we say 2 plus 2 is 5, that is incorrect. But language is not like that. Language is a form of expression when we don't need to be perfect all the time. And this heavily affects our psychology, which affects our learning, which affects our ability to eventually speak English. So how do we get over that? The 3 things we need to keep in mind. Very first thing to understand very fundamentally is that learning a language is like learning any other skill and involves something known as the dip. If we are here and we have a goal, we usually think we have to move from point A to point Z. Simple. But most of the time we forget to realize that it's not a straight road. In fact, it's a huge dip that we need to cross before we get to our goal. And we don't know how deep this dip really is. So we start off in the absorption phase where we're just getting a lot of information, and then we don't know what to do with that information. We cannot apply it practically, and we're just more or less lost or confused and discouraged because we spend time on something and not seen almost any results. This usually means that we're in the dip, and it's usually the space where most of us give up. But if we can push through that, we eventually start seeing our goal come closer to closer because we start going up the curve. Now, you might already know this information, but it's important to keep it in mind because it's something that very strongly relates to the next point about what really keeps us motivated to go through this dip. And that is this. When a student comes to us to learn English, we ask them, hey, why do you want to learn this language? And most of them say that I want to be fluent in this language. And that's the problem. We have a vague goal when it comes to picking up a language called fluency. And the problem with that is that that goal is way too ambitious and does not solve for our actual need. Instead, if we take a more goal-oriented approach, we can become a lot more specific. We can say that my goal with English is to be able to hold conversations with my clients at my office. That's it. What we've essentially done is taken the vast English language and just taken a small piece of it. The piece that is the most relevant and important to us. And if we just focus on that one area and then focus on just the vocabulary, tenses, grammar, in this one space, what happens is that the information becomes a lot more digestible, and most importantly, it becomes directly applicable. And application is the key. If we just learn a language from a teacher and don't really have a place to practice it, we're eventually going to get demotivated, or we're going to forget what we learned. But if we have a constant source of practicing this in a very realistic scenario, it gives us the highest chance of retaining that information. And at the same time, we need to focus on point 3, which is very, very critical. Something to remember from the very beginning of this video is that language is not maths, it's an expression, which means that if we make a mistake, if we use the present perfect progressive instead of the present progressive, that's okay. And if we tell ourselves that as long as we are getting our points across clearly while we're in the process of learning, that's the main thing we need to do. It's about communicating, not necessarily about speaking English. And when we do that, when we start being okay with not being perfect in the way we're delivering these sentences in this scenario, we stop feeling that nervous when we need to speak because we're not holding ourselves to that higher standards. And eventually this helps us increase our confidence, which is better for our psychology, which helps us learn faster and keeps us more motivated, and that increases our ability to speak. And it's after this process that we can start focusing more on the nuances and getting more perfect in the way we speak. So understand that there's a dip in the learning process. being goal-oriented, and finally having the knowledge that language is an expression and we don't need to feel nervous if we screw up every now and then. And finally, that we need to focus on expressing as opposed to speaking perfectly. And that's about it. The reason why psychology is more important than grammar or vocabulary. Now, you might also wonder that a practical way of learning English is to watch a lot of English shows and movies. But there's a reason why that rarely ever tends to work. And if you want a better method than that to practice your English, then check out this video right here.